On August 6, 1945, bombs rained down on Hiroshima, a bustling economic and political hub of a vast region in western Japan. A dark day for Japan. But on that same day, at an airfield in California, another tragedy quietly unfolded. The United States' top ace pilot, Major Richard Baum, a hero who had survived countless fierce air battles in his P-38, perished during a test flight of the Air Force's New Hope, the P-80 Shooting Star jet fighter. It was not just a machine, it was the future, cloaked in a sleek, astonishingly balanced design. With its clean aerodynamic lines and gracefully tapered forward fuselage, many even called it the most beautiful jet of World War II. Then this revolutionary aircraft, beautiful and brimming with promise for a glorious future, began its journey with the sacrifice of a legend. Let us explore the P-80, a crucial yet often underappreciated part of the history of American air power. A plane whose story of glory and loss was intertwined with it from the very first days. The urgent need for a new fighter in 1943. The skies over Europe in 1943 no longer belonged to the Allies. October became a month of horror with the Black Week, etching the pain of hundreds of American air crews into history. The proud B-17 flying fortresses, symbols of air power, fell like leaves amidst a web of German anti-aircraft fire and fighters. The catastrophic losses crippled the strategic bombing campaign deep into enemy territory, forcing it to a humiliating halt. American bombers could not safely conduct deep strikes into German territory without long-range fighter escorts. Allied military leaders were stunned by this technological breakthrough. The Me-262 could fly 120 miles per hour faster than the best American fighter of the time, the North American P-51 Mustang. The German jet was a formidable force, armed with 4 30mm cannons mounted in its nose and 24 R-4M air-to-air rockets. This made it not only faster, but also deadlier than any Allied aircraft. The situation grew more dire when American military leaders received intelligence. German jets would soon join the fight. Germany was ramping up mass production, with projections of hundreds of Me-262s flooding the skies. To make matters worse, the Arado R-234 Blitz, the first jet-powered bomber reconnaissance aircraft, was also ready to unleash further terror. The United States and the Allies faced a lethal technological advantage that threatened to completely reverse the tide of the air war. The pressure weighed heavily on military leaders. They had to find an answer, and they had to find it immediately. In a desperate search for a counterweapon, the United States placed its first hopes in its secretly developed jet offspring, the Bell P-59 era Comet. It was a rushed response, the initial attempt to step into a new era, but hope quickly turned to bitter disappointment. The P-59, though dubbed a jet, was pathetically slow. Its speed was only marginally better than the propeller-driven aircraft it was expected to replace, and it was utterly laughable compared to the wind-splitting velocity of the Me-262. Combat trials were a disaster. It was outclassed even by older P-38s and P-47s. Its engines were weak and unreliable, and the airframe was unstable. The military's final verdict was a death sentence with no reprieve. The P-59 was unsuitable for combat, and orders were drastically cut, and America's first jet was quietly relegated to a training role, a false start and a painful lesson in the complexities of new technology. The failure of the P-59 deepened the sense of shame and ignited an even more urgent need. America had to have a true jet fighter, a weapon capable of confronting the German threat. From the ashes of shattered hopes, under the suffocating pressure of a life-or-death race, an extraordinary and rapid development program was about to be born. A program that would give rise to a legend, the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star. Skunk Works, the Secret Forge, and the 143-day race. With hopes for the P-59 shattered and the specter of the Me-262 increasingly haunting the skies of Europe, the pressure on America was immense. An answer had to come, and it had to come lightning fast. In the summer of 1943, in the heart of Burbank, California, a silent revolution began under a peculiar, humble circus tent, the birthplace of the legendary Skunk Works. The mastermind behind this audacious campaign was none other than Clarence Kelly Johnson, a brilliant engineer with unparalleled vision. Recognizing the urgency and the need for absolute secrecy, Johnson assembled a small, elite group of Lockheed's finest engineers and mechanics, isolating them from the company's cumbersome machinery. Their workspace? A rented circus tent, crudely shielded by old engine crates and camouflaged by the pungent stench of a nearby plastics factory, a perfect way to ward off prying eyes. This was the secret forge, where conventional rules were cast aside. Johnson set his own terms, grueling 10-hour workdays, 6 days a week, under his direct and sole command, eliminating all bureaucratic red tape that could slow progress. Only a select few in this elite team knew the staggering true goal. They were building America's first jet fighter. The legendary name Skunk Works was born from this secrecy and unique workspace, inspired by a mysterious locale in a popular comic strip of the time. The challenge posed by the Army seemed impossible. Design and build a jet fighter ready for flight testing in just 150 days, an unthinkable deadline in the aviation industry. Facing suffocating pressure from the technological race with Nazi Germany, and without even having the precious British Goblin jet engine in hand, they had to design based on blueprints and specifications. As Johnson's team plunged into a race against time with ironclad determination, bypassing conventional processes, sometimes starting the project with just a handshake, they achieved the miraculous. Through extraordinary focus, relentless creativity, and a unique working method, the XP-80 prototype, nicknamed Lulu Bell, pose was completed in just 143 days, beating even the unimaginable deadline. This was not merely a technical triumph, it was the birth of the Skunk Works philosophy, a powerful testament that small, focused teams, granted autonomy and freed from bureaucratic shackles, could achieve the extraordinary. That spirit, forged under the pressures of war, gave rise to the P-80, a fragile yet radiant glimmer of hope for America in the turbulent dawn of the jet age. A historic day, Lulu Bell, tears through the sky, and the cost of speed. After 143 days of frenetic and secretive work, the fruit of Skunk Works' labor finally emerged under the cold sunlight of the Mojave Desert on January 8, 1944. At Muroc Airfield, the atmosphere was taut with anticipation. Military officials, Lockheed engineers, and Kelly Johnson himself held their breath for a historic moment, the first flight of the XP-80 Lulu Bell. Veteran test pilot Milo Burcham sat in the cockpit of the sleek, green-painted aircraft, unlike anything he had ever flown. As the British Goblin jet engine roared with an unfamiliar, piercing whine, Lulu Bell surged forward and gracefully lifted off the parched ground. But the joy was short-lived. 5 minutes later, Burcham landed, his face betraying concern. The control systems, particularly the hydraulically assisted ailerons, were overly sensitive and entirely unfamiliar. Kelly Johnson, with his characteristic calm, reassured his pilot. It was a new machine, a wild stallion that needed taming. Regaining confidence, Burcham took off again, and this time, the world witnessed a miracle. The skilled pilot, once an airshow performer, unleashed Lulu Bell's full potential. The aircraft rocketed forward at unimaginable speed, executing spectacular low passes and breathtaking bank turns. "It was a magnificent performance," Johnson proudly declared. "Our plane is a success." In subsequent test flights, the XP-80 made history by breaking the 500-mile-per-hour barrier in level flight. America's first jet fighter achieved this feat, officially thrusting the United States into the speed race of the jet age. However, the road ahead was far from rosy. Initial glory was quickly overshadowed by harsh challenges. During a ground test, the engine's air intake duct collapsed, causing significant damage. Fortunately, the American-developed General Electric I-40 jet engine, later designated J-33, was completed just in time, more powerful and ready to replace the Goblin, though it required redesigning a larger airframe for the XP-80A prototypes. But the steepest price was paid in blood and tears. Testing a completely new technology was inherently perilous. Milo Burcham, the very pilot who had made history with Lulu Bell, became a victim of the program. He found the heavier XP-80A with its new engine to be an unwieldy dog. And in October 1944, an engine failure during takeoff claimed the life of this talented aviator. Despite the setbacks and heartbreaking losses, the Lockheed team, under Kelly Johnson's steadfast leadership, who even temporarily sat in a makeshift observer seat to troubleshoot an irritating duct rumble, pressed on with relentless improvements. The military's faith in the P-80's potential remained unshaken, evidenced by a large order for YP-80 test aircraft. The Shooting Star, though born amid thorns, was ready for the challenges ahead, inching closer to the real battlefield. Secret mission in Europe, a near encounter with the enemy. While the first P-80s underwent grueling testing in California, pushing the limits of speed and enduring tragedies, across the Atlantic, the air war raged on. The threat of the Me-262 and other German jet aircraft loomed large, and General Henry Hap Arnold, head of the United States Army Air Forces, was eager to deploy his new ace. Thus, in late 1944, a top-secret operation dubbed Project Extraversion was launched. 4 pre-production YP-80A aircraft, precious and still fraught with potential flaws, were covertly disassembled, crated, and shipped across the perilous Atlantic. 2 were bound for England, 2 for Italy. The first time American jet fighters set foot on the European theater, the official purpose was to test them under real-world conditions and boost the morale of bomber crews terrified by German jet fighters. But deep down, everyone understood that, given the chance, these jets would be thrust into combat. However, fate was unkind to these pioneers in Europe. In England, hopes of thrilling dogfights were swiftly extinguished when one of the 2 YP-80As crashed catastrophically during a test flight, claiming the pilot's life and intensifying the already heavy veil of secrecy surrounding the program. The surviving aircraft, rather than hunting Me-262s, was loaned to Rolls-Royce for testing their own jet engine. In the Italian theater, the remaining 2 YP-80As landed at Lucena Air Base in early 1945, just as German Arado R-234 jet reconnaissance aircraft began operating in the region. The prospect of a historic clash between jet aircraft of opposing sides briefly flickered, yet the YP-80A missions in Italy remained tightly shrouded, limited to a handful of unarmed reconnaissance flights, never once encountering the enemy. Why did the Shooting Star miss its rendezvous with World War II? The answer lies in the battlefield's dynamics. Unlike a desperate Germany, which rushed the flawed Me-262 into combat, the Allies were on a steady path to victory. There was no need to risk deploying a brand new, unproven aircraft like the P-8, still riddled with potential risks, when it wasn't absolutely necessary. Caution prevailed. And so, as the war in Europe drew to a close, the YP-80 as quietly returned to the United States, marking the end of the P-80's brief and unfulfilled chapter in World War II. It had come tantalizingly close, but never tasted the fire of the great conflict it was created for. The true test of the shooting star would have to wait for another conflict, on a distant and unfamiliar sky. Stepping into the jet cockpit, thrill and silent terror. Climbing into the cockpit of a P-80 was like entering an entirely new world. Gone was the cramped, framed canopy. In its place was a clear, bubble-shaped canopy offering a near unlimited panoramic view, a sense of freedom never experienced before. The greatest difference, however, was in the sound and sensation. The earth-shaking roar of piston engines was replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the high-pitched whine of the jet engine waiting to unleash its power. And when the pilot pushed the throttle forward, that acceleration, it was smooth, relentless, and intense in a completely new way, pressing them back into the seat as the aircraft surged forward, effortlessly shattering the 500-mile-per-hour barrier. Aerobatic maneuvers and tight turns were executed with astonishing precision. The hydraulically assisted controls were frighteningly responsive, perfect for dogfighting, but a trap for those unaccustomed to their sensitivity. Yet the initial exhilaration quickly gave way to harsh caution, for this new jet age brought unprecedented challenges. First was the slow-reacting engine, a significant danger. Imagine driving a car and pressing the gas pedal, only to wait a few seconds before the car surges forward. The P-80's J-33 jet engine behaved similarly when the pilot tried to rapidly increase thrust from a low setting. Unlike piston engines, which could accelerate almost instantly, the J-33 required precious time, up to 14 seconds, to spool up and deliver greater thrust. This may not sound long, but in critical moments, such as during a slow landing approach or when needing to accelerate quickly to avoid a collision, those seconds could be fatal. This delay caused numerous catastrophic accidents. Beyond the slow-reacting engine, P-80 pilots had to abandon a seemingly routine habit from flying piston aircraft: how they used the throttle. In piston engine planes, pilots would often slam the throttle full forward for a quick burst of speed, but doing so with the P-80 was extremely dangerous. If the throttle was advanced too quickly, the early J-33 jet engine would receive an overwhelming surge of fuel it couldn't process. This disrupted the combustion process, potentially causing the engine to stall instantly or, worse, catch fire. Pilots had to relearn from scratch, manipulating the throttle gently and gradually, especially when accelerating, instead of instinctively pushing it to the max. Another challenge P-80 pilots had to master came from the very air around them. They discovered that air wasn't always the same. On hot days or at high-altitude airfields in mountainous regions, the air became thinner than usual. This directly affected the P-80. In thin air, both the wings and the jet engine performed less efficiently. The wings struggled to generate enough lift to get the aircraft airborne, and the engine, receiving less air, couldn't produce its usual thrust. As a result, the aircraft required a much longer runway to take off successfully. Many pilots were shocked and anxious as their plane barreled down the runway, refusing to lift off. This lack of understanding about the effects of thin air led to numerous dangerous situations, with aircraft nearly running out of runway before finally climbing. The core issue wasn't the design, but the fact that pilots had to relearn everything, abandoning instincts ingrained in their very being. Transitioning to jet technology demanded a complete shift in flying mentality. The high accident rate in the early days was stark evidence of the difficulties and risks of pioneering a new era. From these cockpit challenges, from lessons paid for in blood, the need for a safer and more effective training method became urgent. This directly led to the creation of the dedicated T-33 T-Bird trainer, a critical solution to tame the shooting star and guide pilots into the jet age more safely. Trial by fire in Korea, from hope to bitter lessons. World War II ended before the P-80 could taste real combat, but fate had prepared a fiercer stage for it, the skies over Korea in 1950. As the pride and first mainstay jet fighter of the United States Air Force, the P-80, now redesignated as the F-80, plunged into the war with high hopes of dominating the skies. Early victories came quickly, such as shooting down enemy propeller-driven IL-10 attack aircraft. Then, on November 8, 1950, the history of air combat turned a page, though not without controversy. Lieutenant Russell Brown, piloting an F-80C, was credited with downing a MiG-15 in what the United States announced as the first all-jet dogfight. It was a historic moment, a bold affirmation of the new technology's power. But the triumph was short-lived. The appearance of the MiG-15, with its superior swept-wing design inspired by German technology, dealt a crushing blow to the F-80's pride. America's straight-wing shooting star suddenly became obsolete. The MiG-15 was faster, climbed better, and was far more maneuverable at high altitudes. American pilots were stunned to face an opponent that could strike from above and vanish before they could react. Beyond contending with the more advanced MiG-15, F-80 pilots also had to master their own aircraft. As one of the earliest jet fighters, the F-80 systems were rudimentary compared to later designs. Even the AT-33 training variant, essentially a two-seat F-80 or T-33 used to familiarize pilots with jet aircraft for the battlefield, had very basic systems. A pilot who flew it once recalled that the fuel flow gauge in the cockpit was as large as a dinner plate. This underscored the critical need to monitor fuel, as early jet engines were notoriously fuel-hungry. Unable to compete with the faster MiG-15 in dogfights, the F-80 was reassigned to other roles. Yet this resilient aircraft was far from sidelined. It found vital new purposes, attacking ground targets and conducting reconnaissance missions. The demand for reconnaissance imagery was so great that technicians in Korea modified numerous F-80Cs at airfields, converting them into RF-80C reconnaissance aircraft. They removed the 6 nose-mounted machine guns and installed cameras in their place. In some cases, they even salvaged camera-equipped nose sections from damaged RF-80As and fitted them onto intact F-80C airframes. These converted RF-80Cs became critical reconnaissance assets, gathering invaluable intelligence from the skies. However, the new attack role thrust the F-80 into fresh dangers. Flying low to strike ground targets made it an easy target for the enemy's dense anti-aircraft fire. Losses skyrocketed, not only from flak, but also due to the fragility of the J-33 jet engine. A heartbreaking story from a former F-80 pilot illustrates this. A wingman in Japan was forced to eject at low altitude when his F-80's engine exploded. Shrapnel from the blast embedded itself in his body, staying with him for the rest of his life. A tragic testament to the price paid by pioneering pilots flying these early jet machines. Ultimately, the arrival of the F-86 Sabre, with its swept-wing design comparable to the MiG-15, officially ended the F-80's role as an air superiority fighter in Korea. The first-generation Shooting Star had delivered a valiant but hard-learned performance, proving its worth in new roles while exposing the clear limitations of aviation technology at the dawn of the jet age. The cost of the jet. Dawn, tragedy. The hard-learned lessons and heavy toll paid in the skies over Korea were immense, but perhaps the most heartbreaking tragedies and least-known stories occurred back home, during the ambitious and perilous birth of the Shooting Star. The harsh truth is that this technological breakthrough came at the cost of the lives of some of the most talented pilots. The initial P-80 test program was notorious for its deadly risks. and the tragedies that unfolded forever changed the approach to aviation safety. The first victim was Milo Burcham, Lockheed's veteran chief test pilot, who had tamed countless aircraft before. In October 1944, the engine of his YP-80A failed during takeoff, claiming the life of the 41-year-old pilot, a devastating shock that revealed the unpredictability of the new technology, even for the very best. But the death that shook the nation was that of Major Richard Dick Baum, America's greatest World War II ace. With 40 confirmed kills, was deemed too valuable to be sent back into combat. Tragically, he perished testing a P-80 on his homeland soil on August 6, 1945, the very day the first atomic bomb fell on Hiroshima. A faulty fuel pump was to blame. Boom! With only 4 hours of flight time on the P-80, ejected, but it was too late. The legend fell. America mourned in stunned disbelief as a symbol of victory was claimed by the very weapon of the future. Even Burcham's successor, Tony Liviere, another extraordinary pilot, narrowly escaped death. The turbine of his P-80's engine disintegrated mid-flight, tearing apart the tail. He ejected and survived but broke his back upon landing. Miraculously, he returned to the test cockpit after 6 months of recovery. These catastrophic and relentless accidents, especially Baum's death, forced General Arnold to immediately halt the P-80 program. A massive safety campaign was launched by the Air Force and Lockheed to restore confidence. The finest pilots, including future legend Chuck Yeager, were tasked with flying hundreds of incident-free hours to prove the aircraft could be mastered. From these tragedies, costly lessons were learned, driving groundbreaking improvements in pilot training, testing procedures, and accident investigations, safety standards that we now take for granted in the aviation industry. The enduring legacy of the silent pioneer. From the shadows of tragedy and hard-won safety lessons, the P-80 shooting star not only survived but reasserted its place, leaving a legacy far deeper and more multifaceted than most realize. After its tumultuous testing phase, the Air Force recognized the promotional potential of this speed machine. Record-breaking flights followed. It became the first jet to fly coast to coast across the United States in 1946, and a specialized variant, the P-80R Racer, with shorter wings and optimized aerodynamics, reclaimed the world speed record for America in 1947 at a stunning 623 miles per hour, ending 24 years of foreign dominance. Victories in prestigious air races further solidified the P-80's image as a symbol of American technological prowess. Beyond speed, the P-80's design philosophy, particularly its placement of the engine within the fuselage rather than under the wings, became a gold standard, influencing nearly all subsequent United States jet fighter designs for decades. But perhaps the greatest and most unexpected legacy of the P-80 lies not in its combat or speed records. As its limitations became apparent and the need for jet pilot training grew urgent, Lockheed made a brilliant move. They stretched the F-80's fuselage slightly to accommodate an instructor's seat. Thus, the T-33 T-Bird was born. This two-seat trainer became a phenomenal success, a reliable workhorse for the United States Air Force and dozens of other nations worldwide. With nearly 6,000 units produced, 3 times the number of F-80s, the T-33 trained generations of jet pilots, serving steadfastly for decades. Remarkably, the last T-33 only officially retired from military service in Bolivia in 2017. Consider that, over 70 years after the original P-80's first flight. Beyond its longevity, the T-33 also served as the foundation for the F-94 Starfire, a critical all-weather interceptor that played a vital role during the Cold War. The F-80s themselves, after their service in Korea, continued to serve in the National Guard and Air Force Reserve for some time before quietly retiring. But their story doesn't end there. Today, many P-80, F-80s, and T-33s are meticulously preserved, proudly displayed in aviation museums worldwide, such as the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Ohio. They stand as living historical witnesses, allowing us to marvel at the pioneer that paved the way for the jet age, a machine that may not have been the brightest star, but is undoubtedly one of the most foundational cornerstones of modern aviation. We've just explored the turbulent journey of the Lockheed P-80 Shooting Star, from the lightning-fast creation at Skunk Works, the tragedies of pilots like Richard Bong, its triumphs in Korea, to its immortal legacy with the T-33. Though imperfect and quickly surpassed, the P-80 was a pivotal step that ushered America into the jet age, a testament to innovation and courage. Its story reminds us that every advancement comes at a cost, and the shooting star will forever remain a vital piece of aviation history. If you were a P-80 pilot, what would you fear most, the engine's lag or its speed? Visit the National Museum of the United States Air Force to see the P-80 in person. And if you're curious to learn more about Skunk Works or Lockheed, there are plenty of fascinating books out there, such as Skunk Works, a personal memoir of my years at Lockheed. Give it a read and let us know your thoughts. Thank you for joining us, and see you next time.